Story 1. The best man was on his way to my wedding destination, and the last thing I said to him on the phone while he was driving was hurry up. He died in a car crash about an hour later. I know it was not my fault, but it still haunts me. My new husband said, "I do," and then left to identify the body. It was awful. Story 2. He quit his job to travel. He was always a fairly stoic guy, but he was so upbeat, like he was truly happy with his decision. I gave him a big hug and told him to keep me updated with pictures and so on. 2 weeks later, he ended his life. The travel was a cover, and he had planned everything in detail. I am still devastated that I did not see through his ruse. Story 3. In 2002, a couple of days after Christmas, my dad woke me up in the middle of the night. He said, "I'm leaving." I said, "Okay, bye." That was the last time anyone ever saw him. Story 4. I saw a girl I knew and said hello to her at a rave and foam party. We had mutual friends and were on friendly terms but not close. She died about 4 hours later from a drug overdose on the premises. I was 18 and she was 15. Story 5. Saw an old friend in a restaurant. I did not go over and speak because he was with his family and I did not want to disturb them. He died suddenly less than 2 weeks later. Always say hello. You may not get another chance. Story 6. I used to have an acting partner in a dramatic duet back in high school. We did our rehearsal scene and then went home. The next day, I came in and heard that she had hung herself in her garage overnight. Story 7. An ex-longtime girlfriend of mine and I are in our 60s now. The last time I saw or spoke to her was at our college homecoming when we were 27. She was wearing a very flattering sundress, backlit by the sun. At that moment, I knew that for the rest of my life, the question of why I had ruined that relationship would haunt me. And it has. Story 8. It haunts in a good way. I had a close friend pass away, and the last time we met, they were still healthy. We spent 2 days together during her short visit, covering many topics, including our deep fears. She passed with professional regret, but she was already so much more than what she wanted to achieve. We cried and laughed together. Sigh. Story 9. I used to work at a university where there was a lecturer. I knew him well early on. We went to lunch together a few times, but often I would just go to his office during quiet times to chat. He looked like John Malkovich. I left that job and said goodbye to him. We kept in touch sparingly. I remember the last time I spoke to him, he lectured me about the energy conversion rate of water heaters. I didn't speak to him for about 6 months because, life. I heard from a friend that he had pancreatic cancer and died. I was in shock. I remember the energy he had. Colin, if you're up there, my glass is raised to you, my friend. Story 10. Once I was working in a care home and was sent to clear the rooms. It is good to make small talk, so I went into an elderly man's room and asked if he was all right. He gave a thumbs up, smiled, and said he was okay. On the next shift, the carers told me that he had died. Story 11. The last time I saw my favorite cousins before we all got married and had children, I realized the moment for what it was and simply lived in it. We were all young adults from 18 to our late 20s, experiencing our last Christmas as big kids. Story 12. A family friend who had chronic obstructive pulmonary disease had to be admitted to the hospital. I was at college and my mother was going to see her first, then pick me up. However, I insisted she pick me up, and we both went to see her. I had a very strange gut feeling. A few days after I saw her and gave her a small cuddle, she died during surgery due to a mistake made by the medical team. My gut knew something was not right, and I am very glad I listened to it. Our last conversation was a lovely one, and she went knowing she was loved and cared for. Story 13. We met at the club. He kissed my cheeks, my forehead, and my lips. He told me I was a great, likable person, and he would always appreciate me for that. A week after that, he was gone. He had never done something like this before. It felt strange at the moment and made sense after his death. Story 14. I saw my friend who works in a shop as I was passing by. They were very busy serving customers, so I didn't interrupt them and decided I would drop in another time to say hi. They died a few days later due to a heart attack. Story 15. Had a morning meeting with a colleague, went to lunch and was told to go home. I died during my lunch break. It was the first time I experienced the denial stage. I think I had to be told 20 times, and I kept saying, "You're joking." I had a meeting this morning and they were fine. Here 1 minute, gone the next. Rest in peace, Angie. You were a good one. Story 16. Held his hand and felt his life slip away. All the old blood that had accumulated in his stomach came out. Story 17. I am an immigrant living in Peru from China. I have been here for almost 30 years. The only family we have here was a distant uncle and his sons. We live in his house under a contractual agreement. He passed away in 2016. He was an awful person and literally skin and bones for about 10 to 15 years, as far as I can remember. In his last year, he was slowly deteriorating. At first, he could no longer walk outside. Later, he needed an oxygen tank and so on. I saw him being wheeled to the hospital. When we visited him, he was almost gone. He passed away by the time we arrived home from the hospital that day. I saw it all happen before my eyes. I still remember it. Story 18. I went round to my grandmother's to say hello as it was my 18th birthday. It was pleasant. We shared a whiskey together and I said my goodbyes. My cousin lived next door, and as I was leaving, I saw him and we had a little chat. He was happy to hear I was 18, the legal drinking age in the United Kingdom. We said that when it was Christmas, we would share a pint together, and I would buy him a drink for the first time. It never happened, though. He was stabbed and died in hospital a month later. Some young men attacked him, thinking he was part of a gang they did not like. It was a bitter Christmas. Story 19. I was 14, and my father had been admitted to hospice less than a week earlier. He was asleep, his breath ragged. I went into his room to put my drink in the fridge, kissed him on the cheek, told him I loved him, then went out the door to go for a walk with my mother and my sister. We came back an hour later, and he had passed in that time. I was probably the last to see him alive. Story 20. Original poster, you are so kind to respond to everyone. I told my big sister she was my best friend as she left, and I lost her a week later. It does not really haunt me, but I think about it a lot, and I am so glad I said it. Story 21. It was not the last time because my father and I commuted together to work every day. But the weekend before he passed, I was at his house and saw his motorcycle in the garage. I had an overwhelming feeling of fear and the urge to roll it out into the driveway and set it on fire so he could not hurt himself. The following weekend, he died on that very bike. Story 22. I still remember the look in their eyes as they walked away, knowing it was the last time I would ever see them. Story 23. I relocated from Jackson to Memphis for a job, but often visited family since it is only a 3-hour commute. The last time I saw my father was on a late evening when I was heading back to Memphis. He had been sick a few weeks earlier. The last thing he said to me was, "You are coming back to visit us again, right?" A month later, he passed away due to pneumonia. Story 24. I went to an amusement park with my father figure. We returned home and he went to the hospital. He had a condition with his legs that often required hospital visits. This time, he did not come back. He had a heart aneurysm. Doctors found it and were about to surgically remove it, but it ruptured before they could. It was completely unexpected. Story 25. A man I worked with was receiving a redundancy package. He seemed very final about everything. We thought it was because he was leaving. He took his own life. Looking back, some of us missed the signs. He had everything planned, and I don't think anything we said or did would have made a difference. I now make sure to take the time to get to know my colleagues, even if they slightly annoy me. If I get a hint that they are struggling, I let them know about services they can speak to. Story 26. A friend died in a motorcycle accident. The last time I saw him, we were finishing work, and he asked if I wanted a ride home. I declined because I was a little upset about something irrelevant that he had done, so I figured I would rather get my steps in than ride with him. How I wish I had taken that ride. Story 27. In May of 2021, A musician friend of mine told me over the phone that coronavirus disease was being blown out of proportion. I told him that John Prine, Bucky Pizzarelli, and Charlie Pride would certainly tell him that it was not, except that they could not, right? As a guitarist and singer, my friend admired all three of them. That kind of shut him up. We talked about something lighter for a couple of minutes and finished our conversation on a friendly note. My friend did not phone the following Sunday night, his usual time, so I figured that he must have felt embarrassed by his flippant remark and my quick rejoinder. The following morning, while I was at work and preparing to start my day, I received a text from my friend's sister, whom I barely knew. She told me that my friend had been found dead in his apartment after suffering a seizure related to his diabetes and poor management of it. Story 28. I had a coworker that I rode the work elevator with. He and I would make small talk and smile at each other. One time, he showed me the control room when I was curious about it. Nice guy. One day, when his shift was over, I randomly watched him walk out of the building. Just a quick glance. I later learned that he died in a car accident on his way home. I will never forget that last look from his last day. Story 29. I was visiting my great-uncle in the hospital. He was dying of heart failure. When we said goodbye, he gave me a two-fingered wave. I saw his hand like that and instantly knew it was the last time. Story 30. Opposite of haunts. The last conversation I had with my father was after a big argument. The last words we said were, "No matter what, I love you." He died the next morning. 20 years later, it still means a lot. Story 31. A couple of days before Christmas 2023, my husband and I were talking when he suddenly had a heart attack. I called emergency services, and he was transported to the hospital, where he was pronounced deceased. I was so overwhelmed that I did not realize saying goodbye was the last time I would see him. He was picked up by the funeral home and was cremated, which is what he wanted. I can barely remember the hospital or saying goodbye because I was in shock, and I feel horrible about that. 40 years together ended in a blink. Story 32. My mom was a frequent visitor to the emergency room. I went there the first couple of times, thinking she was going to die. I lived 2 hours away. After about 18 false alarms, I stopped going. Then she was on life support and they called me to ask if they should discontinue it. She could live 20 minutes or 2 weeks without it. I told them to pull it. She had no life left in her. 10 minutes later, I received a call that she had died. She was a terrible mother, but she was still my mother. I never got to say anything because I was not there when she died. Story 33. I saw my brother's girlfriend a few days before she took her own life. It took a few days to really realize that she did my eyebrows and styled my hair just 3 days before. My hair had not been washed since she styled it for me. Story 34. My ex-sister-in-law. We said we would catch up the weekend after Christmas to exchange gifts. She died suddenly on December 27th. The gifts I planned on giving her sat in my house for a year. Story 35. My mother tucked me in for bed before my first day of high school. She told me she loved me and went off to bed. I found her dead the next morning. I called my brother and told him that I never wanted to see him again and that he was hurting our dad with his drug use. He died a week later. I took my dad to the local video store in town that he loved. I picked out a movie we used to watch together. He died a few days later. I am all that is left in my family. I have no one else now. I could disappear and no one would know. It is truly a sad feeling. For whatever mistakes I made in a past life, I have made up for them several times over in this one. Story 36. A close friend died from coronavirus disease 2019. I was the last person to see them, and I have never told anyone this. I could tell that they were depressed. They were clearly about to get really drunk. They were hospitalized from alcohol poisoning not long after, although I do not know if it was that night or some day soon after. They caught coronavirus disease 2019 in the hospital and died. I still partially blame myself for not doing more. I think of her a lot. She was one of the realest people out there. Story 37. We are going back a ways. I was a police officer in Southern California. I was pretty new at the time. I was on good terms with Special Agent Thomas Riggs, although we were not close friends. I went camping in the mountains, and upon my return, I saw officers wearing black tape across their badges. I asked about the tape, which symbolized mourning, and was told that Special Agent Thomas Riggs was shot and killed. Officer Jacobs was also shot and run over with a police car. He was paralyzed and not expected to live, but he did survive. The suspect also shot an unarmed female civilian ride-along who was seated in the passenger seat of one of the police cars. Shockingly, the suspect was acquitted. He claimed that the officers were racists and Nazis who planned to murder him because he was black, and that his actions were self-defense and racially motivated. They portrayed the surviving officer as a racist Nazi, which was not true. The suspect later killed himself. None of us were sad. It is odd seeing someone full of life one day and dead the next. I think he was in his 30s or early 40s, and this was on my beat 2, beat 414. I sometimes wonder what might have happened if I had not been camping that day. Could I have been shot or killed? Could I have saved someone? Who knows? Story 38. There was a girl I went to school with, and the last time I saw her, she asked me to eat lunch with her in the foyer of the school because she was bullied very badly. It made me so sad, and I never saw her again, despite the fact that she lived on my street. I could tell she never moved. I genuinely think she took her own life, and it makes me very sad for her and her family that she suffered as she did. Story 39. My friend from high school. I do not remember when I last saw him. I remember in exact detail when I found out he was gone, the wake, and everything related. But I do not know the last time we saw each other. He was only 21. This summer will be 10 years, which is hard to imagine. Story 40. My family and I arrived at our grandparents' care home after we received the news that our grandfather had passed away. I went into the living room and then went over to my grandmother. I saw him lying there on the floor. I will never forget seeing him there. I saw him again at the funeral home a few hours later for a final goodbye before he was cremated. Story 41. Driving by, saw friend's dad enjoying the sun in the backyard one last time before going in for cancer treatment. He never came home. Story 42. I was in grade school. One of the other students I barely knew approached me and asked why I wasn't more social with him. I thought we were friends, are the only specific words I remember. I was shy, socially awkward, and didn't know what to say to adequately express my surprise, confusion, and desire to say I did like him but didn't know he felt that strongly about me. He left before I even had a chance to try. He was gay and committed suicide before he graduated. Story 43. Had your typical troublemaker elementary school kid actually escorted to a police car in 8th grade during recess. What is most haunting about it is that although he was a troublemaker, he was always kind. I never would have thought he would do something that would warrant that. He was supposed to be at my high school. I have not seen him since that day. Story 44. I texted my brother to be careful while I was working one night. He passed in a car accident a few hours later. Almost 12 years later, and I can still play that night vividly in my head. Story 45. On a Friday, I knew that I would see a faculty member for the last time. She passed away that weekend. Story 46. The last words I ever heard from my childhood best friend's mother. In my 2nd grade year, my best friend died just after winter break. Cancer took him from us all too soon. He was a well-loved member of our school. I don't think a single kid didn't know him. He was that kind of bright and beautiful kid. Our school held a memorial service for him to help us cope with his loss. They invited his parents so they could grieve with the community and hear stories from peers who loved him very much. I told his mother that I loved him and missed him so much. I had even completed some of the makeup homework for him because I didn't want him to be held back a year like he had been in 1st grade. I think that might have made her angry because we were both sickly kids and often got each other's classwork and homework when one of us missed school. I'll never forget her face in that moment. I've never seen someone so angry and sad at the same time, then or ever since. Why couldn't it have been you? Why did it have to be my son? She started crying, breaking down so hard that my friend's dad had to take her out of the service. I remember him quietly thanking everyone, crying himself. Not angry, just intensely sad. As an adult and a parent now, I can tell myself she was overcome with grief. She lost her only child, her son. He might have been my best and only friend, but he was her world. But back then, I had lost my great-grandmother, my nanny dog, and now someone my age, my best friend, and it all happened within a month. There was much talk about how they were safe in a better place now, happy and without pain. That moment was when I started wondering why it couldn't have been me. I longed to be happy and without pain the way they were. I wanted nothing more than that. Story 47. My best friend, a person I had known since the first year of high school, passed away on Christmas Eve. The last time I saw him, he was heavily sedated with painkillers because of the pain from bone cancer. During his brief moments of clarity, he asked me to help motivate him to get better. It was all I could do not to cry in front of him. Story 48. I did not see him, but the last time I spoke to my bonus dad was a week before his birthday in December 2022. I was sick at home with coronavirus, and he called to check on me on a Thursday before his shift at work. The last thing we said to each other was "I love you," and he told me to let him know if I needed him to get me anything. 2 days later, I was jolted awake by the phone ringing early in the morning. My mother was on the other end, sobbing and screaming that he had been killed while at work by someone who caused his truck to flip and explode. It has been almost 3 years since he has been gone, and that phone call is the reason I cannot sleep through the night. Story 49. Finished playing a football game. We lost 2-0. Jamie, our captain, gave a dressing room speech praising our efforts, telling us all that we had done our best, and there is no shame in losing to a better team. He did not turn up at the pub we all headed to afterward. He was driving there alone when his car skidded on mud in the road and crashed head-on into a tree. He never stood a chance. I will never forget that speech. Story 50. The last time I saw my sister was at my wedding, which completely fell apart. She drove a long way to be there, and I barely got to spend time with her. I am afraid I will forget the feeling of her hugging me goodbye. Story 51. Thanksgiving 2001. My dad was saying his goodbyes and heading back to his apartment. I was exhausted and half asleep on the bed. He stopped at the open bedroom door and whispered goodbye. I could have gotten up to hug him and give a meaningful goodbye, but I did not. I could not even be bothered to mumble the word goodbye. I will make sure to call him next week. Next week turned into the following week, which turned into seeing him at Christmas. He died 2 days before Christmas from a heart attack at 49 years old. Story 52. I saw one of my best friends from high school at about 1 a.m. at a gas station. I hadn't seen him in 3 to 4 years. We had a nice conversation and caught up for about 10 minutes. I remember giving him my number and a parting hug and handshake. At 10 a.m., my wife woke me up to let me know that he had been killed in a car wreck that morning around 2 a.m. I was in shock. Still bothers me. He was a good guy. He just overcorrected after hydroplaning. No drugs, alcohol, or speed were involved. I also wonder if it was the man upstairs letting us have one last conversation together. Story 53. You know how people say, "Go see them. They are in the hospital dying, and you will regret it if you don't go one last time." No, you won't. You really do not want to see someone you love dying. They will be gone and will not resent you for not going, so it has to be about you. The person I loved most in the world. 35 years of wonderful memories. Down the tubes because the first image that comes to mind is always him lying in a hospital bed, screaming in agony. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.